Well, first of all, he was a career Army officer, so he was actually a career patriot. He really was, and his degree was in social studies and history, and he taught it for a long. And he just felt very, very strongly about public service, and he particularly felt strongly about service at this level, because it's a level that touches the lives of people the most. And as far as issues, well, the issues you always have: zoning, waste disposal, water flow, that kind of thing. That never changed over the years. I think he was proud of the fact that that Calcasieu Parish is one of the best, if not the best, run parish in the state. And any time we would go to state conventions or go to the National Association of Counties, we found how good we really were. And he was very, very proud of the general honesty and reliability and everything of the jury. Nothing made him madder than to have somebody talk about those crooks up there. Because unfortunately, we live in Louisiana, and everybody believes that anybody that runs for public office has got to be a crook. And that was not the case. Well, first of all, when you run for office, you've got to be known, recognized. And when your name is Green, you've got to use green. I mean, that's the way it is. But he used green. First of all, he wore Army green for 25 years. And then he wore green all the time. When he taught school, which he did, he graded in green. He wore green to everything, and people always knew his name. And so when he'd go somewhere, at the time he died, he had 4 green jackets. And then we went to one National Association of Counties convention, and out there they give all these little pins out. And some state or something had this little chick as their emblem or their motto. And he got that, and he stuck that up there on his lapel, and he wore that little, and then he says, "Do you remember my name?" "Mm-hmm, Chick Green, Chick Green." And he always did that. One time, I was in Baton Rouge with my daughter, and we passed a men's clothing store, and they had a pair of green saddle Oxfords. And he and I wore the same size shoe, except that his foot was wider than mine. So I went in there and tried them on, and we bought him these green saddle Oxford shoes. And when I brought them home, he looked at that. He says, "I'm not wearing those things." But he started wearing them, and he wore them to school all the time. He wore them everywhere that he went, and I still have them in the closet at home. Yeah, it was. I was only on it for 8 months. I learned very rapidly that it was not my bag. He loved it. He loved working with the public. He loved all of that. Now, I like the public, but I did not like making decisions that were going to change people's lives. It was tough on me. I don't know. I'm just not as tough as he was. And so I did not want to try to run for the second part of it. And actually, Paul Rainwater was interested, and Chick had admired him. So I said, okay, and I turned loose of it. But it was an interesting experience. You sit up here and you see petitioners out there, and they don't want something or another in their neighborhood. And it's tough. I remember there was one place somebody wanted to put a children's a kindergarten nursery kind of thing in their neighborhood. It seemed like it was in Westlake or something. And the neighbors were all up in arms about that. And that was a real eye-opener to me. The reasons they gave why they shouldn't have it, personally, I thought it was a good idea. But the jury voted it down because they went with what the majority of the people wanted, which is probably also a good idea. Well, I tell you, it's sort of interesting. First of all, it's kind of neat when you go everywhere, somebody knows who you are. That's also not neat because, for example, we would go to a wedding and we'd be walking down the aisle after the wedding, and he'd be buttonholed by somebody who wanted something. That was not so pleasant. It makes you feel good when you've been of service. The phone calls were something else. He had this reporter's pad, and whenever the phone rang and it was a constituent, he would take down the name, the phone number, all this kind of stuff, write down what it was they had called about, and he would do the best he could, to answer them, and some of them were impossible. I'm trying to think of there was a police juror on when I was on who had Bergiers, Al Bergiers. Okay. I got this phone call. This one came to me, and I looked back in my husband's phone notebook, and he apparently had gotten a call from the same guy. But the guy was obviously inebriated. And he wanted to talk about something that I realized right away was not in our district. It was Al Burgier's district, and boy, was I happy about that. So anyway, I said, well, sir, I'll be glad to talk to you about it, but I can tell you that this is Mr. Burgier's district. He says, Mr. Burgier's. And he says, spell that for me. And so I spelled it for him. And he says, it's a B-U-G-E. No, it's, and I spelled it 2 or 3 times. And finally, he hung up. And a few minutes later, his wife called. How do you spell that again? And I would have loved to have heard Al have to talk to him because the man was so drunk. I don't know who he was or what he was, but that was really